particularly the Kickapoo.
Immeasurable. We successfully tested principles, sources, and values of our living religious tradition, and this morning we celebrate the very first Sunday of Advent together. Let us celebrate and explore our shared value of generosity and how it intersects with hope. If those supposed opinions and our worship services help you, we should come and visit the Slavic table outside the facing doors and pick up something to work with. If you're new to our congregation, we invite you to learn more about us after the service. For those of you here in person, you can talk to your brother in the atrium, as well as Naomi. There's a link to our cell phone and YouTube notes that will let us connect with you. Our guest call to worship is Reverend Rebecca Savage. Welcome, beloveds. Welcome. We come to spiritual community this morning with many hopes in our hearts. The hope for inspiration, the hope for comfort, the hope for renewal. In this time of space, the inspiration brought out our thirsty souls. In this time and space, may comfort blossom in the gardens of our hearts and bring us sweet relief. In this time and space, may we will course through us as electric as a surge of energy, as serene as a nourishing well, as contagious as joy, and as vitality and rejuvenation. May we come together under all the hopes we hold within. May our 2024 bless us with the gifts of inspiration, comfort, and renewal. Let us worship together. Played while still before we joined together. Here's about 161 piece, The Perfect World is Sounding. Please raise that audio in spirit.
I lived in Milwaukee, and I was newly single with 2 little kids. And one day the Milwaukee Journal, the local newspaper, had a headline. There was this church that was teaching sex education to its children, and it was like a big scandal. I read that headline and said, I'm gonna go check those folks out. So I did.
My very first visit to UUS was a summer service. It was in the summer of 2012, and I remember it well because the Yahoo Drummers group was leading the service. So while we did have readings from Emma Goldman, I also remember hearing the drummers in that celebration. That was in the basement of Channing Hall, so there was plenty of resonance from the drummers, and I just thought that was such an interesting way to lead people in joy and to lead people in appreciating the music that the drummers had done.
I think the things that I remember the most weren't the first couple visits, but were some of the welcoming orientation, joining the community meetings where we got to know some of the people and made some lifelong friends who are still lifelong friends of ours who are part of that same intake class.
I remember running through the upstairs part where it was the actual like full-on church service part, and I remember me and some of the other kids would just be running around and playing hide and seek in there afterwards. It was so much fun.
I am incredibly proud and honored to be a part of the Greenest Church in Iowa, to have helped the movement that brought us here and the whole process of finding a place and building this incredible building. I'm so proud of it, and I'm proud of us for doing it.
It has taken a lot of different people's work, from the committee that helped put together our memorial gardens, from the Building and Grounds Committee, which have really developed wonderful solutions for the plantings we can have on the grounds, and for the bioswales, and also for bringing everyone together.
There's just a bunch of forest and nature that you can go through. The RE wing is accessible, and it's got a bunch of different options for whatever age you are.
I really love the sanctuary, and of course the main room where we have our services, and of course some of that's just because of the beautiful view we have outside our windows. And I can really treasure that because at every time of year we have a beautiful view. So in the middle of winter it can be -20 outside, and yet we can still look out at the pine trees, and then we can see the changes through spring. So I think just being able to sit and meditate on the changes in nature is the most inspiring part.
I honestly kind of think that my favorite room in the building is the one that's kind of out this window behind me. There's a little path that goes by the side of the building and kind of arcs back behind the pulpit and the big windows where the band and the choir are. And it's very shady, and there's some stuff back there for kids to play on because it's just past the RE wing. And I love the fact that we have that here and that it is so close to where worship happens.
The part of UUism that speaks to me the most, that brought me here and keeps me here, is the encouragement and freedom to find your own spiritual path, and you're supported in that. We're expected to do that on our own, to follow one's own spiritual journey and support one another in that endeavor.
I like the fact that it emphasizes how to be in the world, how to live in the world, rather than the state of my soul or needing to believe some, make myself believe some things that I don't necessarily believe.
I definitely like the equity, generosity, and justice, because with equity, I believe that everybody deserves to have their needs met and be able to have whatever they need. Justice, because sometimes the system is corrupt, and generosity, because just a little bit of kindness could go a long way.
I have to say all the UU principles are my favorite, but if I had to pick one, it would be to honor the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part, because that speaks to me of the oneness of everything.
Interdependence really relies on us to look to each other for help and for support, and it gives us the ability to work together in a group with using each other's strengths without totally relying on our own individual qualities.
They all do kind of interweave to me, but I would say the inherent worth and dignity of every person. I'm guessing that's probably a pretty popular one among our group here. I also think that it is one of the more difficult things to do, seeing the inherent worth and dignity in people we disagree with.
I like the second principle the most because justice, equity, and compassion in human relations is something that is very much needed throughout this world.
The emphasis really is on the people, and I love the fact that UUS considers itself a community. We do have people who are members, but pretty quickly community includes people who are not members.
I've had the privilege of being temporary secretary on the board. I've also worked on the membership associates teams and the social justice teams, and wonderful to see how different creative ideas can be applied to help engage members and to make events for the society which can bring in people as well as members, but people from the wider community.
The UU community are people who come to the services, or people who claim to be UU, or anybody who shows an interest. And then there is a wider community outside of that we find important, and participate in the free lunch program, and participate in supporting the free medical and dental clinics and things in the community that are important. So I'm proud of that for us, and I really like being part of that.
We're not just free, but encouraged to be on our own personal spiritual path, as long as it adheres to our shared values and our covenant. And I value that very highly.
You can come in here and just feel welcome almost immediately. You're always meeting new people, and it's a very good place where you can feel safe, be able to feel like you can be yourself without being judged.
You show that you are a UU by how you act in the world and what choices you make, and I like that a lot.
We're part of everything.
Is a time of meditation, contemplation, and prayer. I wanted to share with you one of the songs that I always have to repeat anytime it comes up on my Spotify playlist. I didn't realize the style of the song until I looked at the music video while preparing for the service. And it was perfect for the service of joy, inspired, and hope in this year 2024.
There is a wind, a spite that chills. There's a sun, a sky of still. If I was struggling for breath, would clasp me close, would bear my breathing as I gasped in death. There is a dark the light can't kill, within the blinding fear it fills. If I were huddling for warmth, would clean my clothes, would share that blanket, or would I freeze alone? This is not difficult or radical. This is fundamental. This is pivotal. This is the most important. Be kind. Be gentle. Be mild. Be simple. Be patient, be peaceful, but above all else, be kind. There is a thirst, no substance can quench. There is a hunger that will not be silent. If you were famished, your children unfed, who'd sit you down to share that table? Who'd share that bread? This is not difficult or radical. This is fundamental. This is critical. This is the single most important. To be kind, be gentle, be mild, be simple, be patient, be peaceful, but above all, be kind, be humble, show mercy, show caring, don't hate or hide, don't let fears divide above all else. Above all else, be kind.
The Lord although all these mitzvot are of rabbinic origin, they are included in the scriptural commandment Leviticus 19:18, love your neighbor as yourself. The rules and regulations that we often look at with our modern eyes as a behavioral straitjacket, these rules were in principles designed to give practical examples of living out these acts of loving kindness. These laws provide a community structure that cares for the needs of all of those that live within it. Modern Rabbi Mark Greenspan explains it this way: hospitality is both a communal and a personal responsibility. There are times when all of us are in need of compassionate care and support from the people around us. So, with that bit of context and background, I'm going to tell you a story of hospitality and of what happens when the Mosaic Law works the way it's supposed to. It's a story where suffering turns to hope, a perfect story for the Advent season. It has a lot of other elements that fit very well into the model of an Advent story. There's long-distance travel, extravagant generosity, community building, and, of course, it ends with a baby. But first, there were bad times. The crops wouldn't grow. Fresh water was scarce, and food was scarcer. A future in the town of Bethlehem was severe hunger at best and watching your family slowly die at worst. So Naomi and her husband made a difficult decision. They took their 2 sons and traveled west and south to the other side of the Salt Sea to find a place where the famine hadn't hit. Naomi and her family settled in Moab, adjusting to a new culture and finding work where they could. At least here, there was food. Probably the best adjusters to this culture shock were Naomi's 2 sons. As they became men in their own right, they found ways to fit into the new place, just in time for Naomi's husband to die. The boys moved on with their new lives in this new home, starting families, and yet they still took care of their mother, an aging woman missing her homeland and her husband and regretting the circumstances of her life. And they did their best. And they too died. And so, 10 years after Naomi set foot in Moab, she'd lost everything that she had brought with her. But Naomi was not alone in her grief. Her 2 daughters-in-law, Orpah and Ruth, sat with her. And while they sat, she heard the news that there was food in Bethlehem again. "Go home," she told Orpah and Ruth. "I've decided to go back to Bethlehem. There's nothing for me here. But you're young, and I'm sure you'll snap up new husbands in no time. Go back to your parents' homes. Don't worry about me. You've been kind to me and to my sons. You have done more than enough. Go home." And Orpah heard the sense in Naomi's words, so she returned home after tearful goodbyes. Ruth, however, wasn't leaving. "Look," she said, after another round of Naomi trying to talk some sense at her, "I'm coming with you. Please stop trying to make me go away. I'm serious about this." Before Naomi could protest further, Ruth pulled out the big guns. And I'm going to read this directly from the text because these words are iconic. Ruth 1:16 and 17. "But Ruth said, 'Do not urge me to leave you, to turn back and not follow you. For wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there will I be buried. Thus and more may the Lord do to me if anything but death parts me from you.'" Well, Naomi didn't have an answer to that. So she and Ruth made the long journey back around the Dead Sea, back to Bethlehem, and they arrived back in town just in time for the beginning of the barley harvest. Immediately, Ruth rolled up her sleeves and got to work caring for herself and Naomi. She went out into the fields and picked up the leftover grain that the reapers left behind. And people noticed. They knew who she was, this newcomer, and stories were already starting to circulate about how devoted she was to Naomi. When the landowner of the field that she was gleaning in stopped by, he said, "Oh, hey, who's that?" "Oh, that's the foreigner that came back with Naomi. She's been working hard all morning." Interesting, the landowner said. And he ensured that Ruth knew that she was safe from harassment in his fields and that she was welcome to the water supply and the food that he provided for his workers. After that first day of work, Ruth returned home to Naomi with around 30 pounds of grain. "Whoa, where did you work to get all this?" Naomi said. "Oh, the landowner's name was Boaz." "Huh," said Naomi. "He's a close relative of my late husband." "Oh, well, he said that I should keep coming back to his fields until the harvest is over." And that's exactly what Ruth did. She worked hard in the fields until the very end of the harvest season. As the season neared its end, Naomi pulled her aside and said, "You have been working very hard to provide for me. Let me advise you in how to get a better situation for yourself. You know how I said before that Boaz is a relative? Well, there are some legal implications of that. You should go seek him out at the harvest party this evening and discuss that with him." Okay, said Ruth, and she followed her mother-in-law's instructions. Late that night, Boaz woke up from a light doze on the floor where workers were guarding the grain. He was startled to find a woman at his feet. Who are you?" he says. "I'm Ruth," came the reply, "and I have a proposition for you." Now, the level of salaciousness of Ruth's proposition is ambiguous in some ways, but the gist of her request was this: that Boaz take over the land that had belonged to Naomi's husbands and sons, and take Naomi and Ruth into his household. Ruth essentially was proposing marriage. "Wow," said Boaz, "this is very flattering. You have earned yourself quite a reputation as a woman of noble character. You definitely deserve the protection of a husband, but I actually don't have first legal claim to your husband's land. There's another closer relative that has first dibs, but don't worry, I'll go find him first thing in the morning, and I'll talk with him. If he's not willing to take care of you and Naomi, I will. In the meantime, don't try to go home. Stay here until the morning." And so she did. Boaz was careful to protect her reputation by waking up early to make sure no one knew that she'd been there. He sent her home with a generous gift and with kind words for her mother-in-law Naomi that he would see their situation resolved as quickly as possible. Boaz headed straight to the business center of town. Right as he got there, he saw his cousin or something that had the higher claim to the land in question. "Hey, friend, bring over a few witnesses. I have some business to apprise you of." "Okay," said the cousin or something. "Naomi's selling her husband's land, and you are, of course, a closer relative than I am, so you get right of first refusal." "Wow, that sounds great," said the cousin. "There is one condition on the sale, though," said Boaz. "Oh," said the cousin. "Whoever buys the land from Naomi also has to marry her daughter-in-law, Ruth." Now, I don't know if Mr. Cousin or something had an objection to marrying a foreigner, had a wife already, or just caught on to the fact that Boaz was a little smitten with Ruth, but with that added condition, he paused. I actually have a lot of other responsibilities I have to tend to. Taking on more land is too much for me. You're next in line. Go for it. You're more than welcome to it." And there, before witnesses, Boaz solidified his marriage to Ruth and his new ownership of Naomi's family lands. Of course, he took both Ruth and Naomi into his home. Naomi he cared for as a second mother, and Ruth he loved as a wife. And in the end, Boaz, the hospitable landowner, and Ruth, the generous foreigner, united in their generosity and love toward Naomi, and united in marriage. In time, they were blessed with a son, a legacy of their own generous choices, and the legacy for Naomi's lost family. And wouldn't you know it, their son, Obed, he's the father of Jesse, who's the father of David, the king. I told you the story ended in a baby. And, fun fact, Boaz and Ruth both make cameos in the genealogy of Christ as recorded in Matthew chapter 1. What a legacy. There are a lot of things that I absolutely love about the story of Ruth and Naomi. But one of the things that stands out for this beautiful Advent story is the hope that emerges in the story as a result of Ruth and Boaz choosing generosity in the way that they deal with Naomi. First of all, Ruth. Even though she wasn't raised with knowledge of Mosaic law, she makes a truly extravagant gift of generosity when she chooses Naomi as her family, when she knows that she's choosing a life of hard work and separation from everything she knows. There are many parallels between Ruth's decisions and the story of Abraham. Both Ruth and Abraham leave their country and their kindred to travel to an unknown land. Abraham and Ruth both show fierce loyalty for their family members. When the city that his nephew lives in is attacked, Abraham raises an army, goes after the attackers, and recaptures all the people who had been seized as slave labor and all the loot stolen from the cities, and returns it without asking for any compensation, just because his nephew lived there. Ruth gave up everything she knew to help her mother-in-law, despite the near certainty of being isolated herself for the rest of her life. The time when this story takes place is not a great moment to be an outsider in Bethlehem. Israel was in a near constant state of war with its neighbors at the time. And even within the story of Ruth, she's almost always referred to as Ruth the Moabite to kind of underline the fact that she doesn't even go here. Without Ruth, Naomi had no prospects for a future legacy. The best she could hope was to return to Bethlehem and rely on the prescribed generosity of distant relatives and neighbors. Yet the story ends with Naomi surrounded by family and joy. She has a specific role in the community as she helps raise her grandson and a safe and secure home in Boaz's house. The other thing that saves Naomi is Levitical law. Remember that first law I read from Leviticus? It was about not stripping the field of grain, but leaving some behind for the poor and the stranger to have something to feed themselves with. The people of Bethlehem were celebrating their first big harvest in over a decade, and the landowners still stuck to the script, leaving food behind for others who needed it instead of maximizing their profits in a year of plenty. Because Boaz followed that law, Ruth and Naomi had food during the time of the harvest. Boaz also made sure that his workers were compensated properly and were well hydrated, so it wasn't really that big of a deal for him to extend the offer of food and drink to Ruth because he already was caring for his employees. Boaz also followed the law in regards to claiming Naomi's family land. He didn't have first right, but he made sure that he wasn't encroaching on his cousin or something's legal right by accepting Ruth's marriage proposal right away. He was careful to follow the letter of the law. While there are aspects of Boaz's depiction in the story that paint him also as a very generous man and not just a guy who's blindly following rules, his actions can be read as just the guy who's doing the stuff that he's supposed to, and everything turns out great for him in the end. Even though he's just doing what he's supposed to, his actions bring hope to Naomi and Ruth. He reassures Ruth that even if he's not the one who ends up with her, he'll make sure that her and Naomi don't have to live in limbo any longer than necessary. And this brings me back to one of my favorite things about the story. The story of Ruth and Naomi and Boaz tells us that we can bring hope to our neighbors, our families, and our communities with the big, extravagant life changes like Ruth's, and with small, simple, everyday acts of generosity. Whether that's sharing soup with the neighbor that knocks on your door, listening to a friend vent after a long day, donating to a community partner you believe in, or showing up to serve lunch at the free lunch program. All these actions bring the net sum of the world's hope just a little bit higher. As we enter the darkening days of winter, we can all use a little hope. Yes, suffering is an inevitable part of the human experience, and yet, we can still imagine a community and a world that is more just and less broken than the world we live in now. And we can work toward that better world together. May we, like Naomi, be graced with generous people in our lives when we need them most. May we, like Ruth, choose love fully and fiercely. And may we, like Boaz, choose every day to live out generosity in simply loving our neighbors. Amen, and blessed be.
How we give, what we do with our lives, our time, our resources, is a reflection of our values. In response to the abundance we are blessed with, every week this congregation donates generously to organizations in the community whose work aligns with our values and principles. Our community partner agency this month is the Free Dental Clinic, which has served the local community for over 50 years. Dentists, dental students, dental hygienists, and dental hygiene students volunteer to provide exams, treatment plans, cleanings, fillings for cavities, and simple tooth extractions for adults and children who would not otherwise have access to care. In the sanctuary, the ushers will collect the offering. All cash contributions go directly to our community partner agency. You can follow the instructions on the screen to give online. If you are writing a check, please use the memo line to designate the purpose. In addition to assisting our community partner, you may contribute towards your pledge or make a gift to support our operating expenses. The offering is a sign of commitment to this free congregation, which is completely supported by the generosity of all who join with us. As we give and receive the offering, may we be transformed by our giving, and may the world be transformed by our gifts. May what has been shared today help us more fully affirm our interconnection and live into love and justice. Immediately after the service, we gather in Fellowship Hall and outside, not outside, for conversation and community. If you're a newcomer, we hope you'll grab a snack and then sit down at any table so folks can join you for some conversation.
To close our service today, we'll be singing hymn 347, Gather the Spirit. Please rise in body or in spirit.
Gather the Spirit, harvest the power, our separate fires will kindle on flame. once more. Gather in peace, gather in thanks, gather in sympathy now and then. Gather in hope, compassion, and strength. Gather to celebrate once again. Gather the Spirit growing in all, drawn by the moon and fed by the sun. Winter to spring and summer to fall, the chorus of life resounding as one. Gather in peace, gather in thanks, gather in sympathy now and then. Gather in hope, compassion, and strength. Gather to celebrate once again.
Please join me in the words for extinguishing the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. All these we carry in our hearts and in our minds until we are together again.
Our benediction today was written by Gwen Matthews, and it perfectly encapsulates the hopes that I carry for you as you enter this final month of the year. As December opens up before us, we welcome in the gift of reflection. We turn toward our holiday celebrations and search for common threads of meaning. We begin with Yule, the winter solstice, and we are invited to explore duality, cycles, and seasons, and to witness the Holly King being overcome by the Oak King. Yule reminds us that we all partake in the miracle of renewal. Hanukkah, the Festival of Lights, commemorates a time of miracles when the faith of the Jewish people sustained them to reclaim their holy temple and keep the light of the menorah burning for 8 days. Christmas, the celebration of Jesus' humble birth in a manger, offers us to revisit the miracle of birth and the desire to find saviors to heal the scars of humanity. Here in our church, you are just as much a holiday miracle as the turning of the earth, as persistence and dedication to faith, as creation of new life. We see the love you give others, the space you create to hold one another's joys and sorrows, and the generosity and spirit you entrust to the community. You are the holiday miracle. This community is one of miracle makers.